Welcome in. This is Warchant.com managing editor Ira Schoffel, and I'm joined by senior editor Chris Balas of the Wolverine.com, which is the Michigan website in the Rivals Network. I'm with the Florida State website in the Rivals Network. And it's March Madness. It's Sweet 16. It's the NCAA Tournament. And we're going to go ahead and preview this game, kind of asking each other some questions, discussing this matchup from each of our perspectives. So, Chris, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Doing great, man. I'm glad we're not talking about football, right? So, a couple bad years.
Yeah, it's not like the old days, but basketball's going well. And I wanted to ask you first off, right off the bat, I think, FSU fans were aware that Juwan Howard got the job. But I was just kind of curious, has he kind of exceeded expectations? It seems like he's obviously done well in recruiting, and he's done well with the team getting to the Sweet 16 this quickly. What have been your impressions and the fan base's impression with the job Juwan's done?
Yeah, to say the least, man. You don't know what you're getting when these guys come back. And, we've seen it with Chris Mullen, Patrick Ewing, guys who have failed, going back to their alma maters. And people think, oh, what a great fit, man. This guy loves the place, but they don't have the experience, the coaching experience. Juwan Howard has learned from guys everywhere. He talked about Leonard Hamilton today on his press conference, man, and how much he admired him and how much he learned from him. You look at Eric Spoelstra and being part of that Heat organization for a long time. And so the guy knows basketball, but you just don't know what's going to happen when these guys get their program for the first time. So what he did, he went out and got Phil Martelli from St. Joe's. And
I didn't realize that until this week. Tell us tell listeners or the viewers, people may not remember, but I mean, he's a coaching legend and he's got him on the bench.
Yeah. He does. And you know what? It was funny because Martelli was looking and Juwan was calling people like John Calipari. He even called John Beilein. He said, look, man, this is my first go around. I can't fail here. I need somebody to help me, not to do the work for me. And that's kind of the misconception that, okay, Martelli's, doing the X's and O's. That's not the case, but he wanted somebody who had run a program before. So Calipari said, man, I've got your guy. And Phil Martelli's the guy. They call him the Godfather. It's been a great marriage, man. It's interesting seeing these two guys together, but it's a lot of fun. They really play off each other well. And Martelli told us the first time I ever talked to him, he said, I wanted to join a guy that I thought could play on Monday night and cut down the nets. And he said, I looked at Juwan Howard. He said, the first 10 minutes in talking to him, I realized that this is the guy that I think can get there. And there were a lot of skeptics. I was one of them. I'll admit it. I was thinking, man, you've got John Beilein, one of the best coaches in the game, and you're following up with a guy with no experience. But he has pushed all the right buttons. You can tell he's getting more and more comfortable. He's a player's coach, but he's hard on his kids. The players love playing for him. That's half the battle right there, man. He's done an unbelievable job.
Yeah, the point you made about working for Eric Spoelstra, and he was with the Heat for a long time. This isn't a guy. I think sometimes former NBA stars, when they want to get to coaching, they just want to walk in the door and get the keys to a program. But he really paid his dues, right? I mean, he's not just a superstar. He kind of grinded it for a long time as an assistant coach.
And he's still grinding it. And that's the thing on the recruiting trail. Everybody's like, well, how is he doing it? This guy is on the phone constantly with these kids and texting them with these kids. And, they look at him, and I haven't heard a bad word about him from anybody ever, since he was here with the Fab Five. I was in school when the Fab Five was here, when Juwan Howard played. I'm dating myself a little bit, but he was always kind of the mature guy in the group. They called him the old man, the dad of the group. And that's just who he is. He had a tough upbringing in Chicago. He's talked about that. His grandmother died the day that he signed his letter of intent. She was the one that raised him. And ever since then, he's really kind of been on his own and learned from people. The praise that he had for Leonard Hamilton, I thought that was great. He actually went down. I don't know if you read that and knew that, but he went down when he got the job at Michigan and talked to Leonard, for whom he played at Washington with the Wizards. Leonard was an assistant there. And he said, man, what a help he's been. And, if I can be that kind of a coach going forward, he said, I'm going to do okay. And right now, man, the path, it looks like he's pretty good.
Yeah, Coach Hamilton talked about it a little bit as well. And I know you guys wrote a story about it. We're writing a story about it as well. Mm-hmm. And he, Coach Hamilton, it's kind of neat the way he talked about it. He's impressed, or he almost felt honored, it sounded like, that Juwan sees him as a mentor, even though, there's a lot of great coaches he's played for and worked with. And, you can tell he's impressed by Juwan Howard as well, and wants to, do anything he can to help him out. So it's going to be a neat matchup. Yeah. Obviously FSU fans remember, the game a few years ago in the Elite Eight that kind of went down to the wire. Michigan wins it and advances. For FSU, they just haven't gotten to that level very far. Michigan obviously has. Do Michigan fans remember that game? What were their impressions of Florida State? And Is that something people are talking about going into this game at all?
Absolutely. Great defensive team. Usually I was looking at the numbers today. I think they're 31st in KenPom in adjusted defensive efficiency, which is probably lower than they're used to. They always defend. And with their length, everybody talks about, oh, this is going to be another LSU type game. I'm like, no, it's not going to be another LSU type game. These guys play defense and take pride, and their offense is better than the last time these guys played. Michigan, they did a really good job against Michigan's offense. Was a lower scoring game to get to the Final Four. I believe it was an Elite Eight game. Yeah. So, and it took a late 3 to really ice that one away from Duncan Robinson, who, go figure. Now he's one of the best snipers in the NBA. Who would guess that? But that's what I remember about that. That and so many Michigan fans out there, because they don't get a great opportunity. There's so many alums in California. They don't get an opportunity to see. So I almost felt bad. It was like the deck was stacked against them. I don't know if it'll be the case again this week. There aren't going to be as many fans, but it'll be lessened. I think there's no question about that.
I'll tell you what, man, that was one of the things that really impressed me. And in fact, some of the staff members at FSU were impressed by it. They just couldn't believe how many Michigan people were in California for that game. And obviously the attendance is going to be a little bit different now, but a lot of people, I think you're going to hear sometimes the media are going to talk about Florida State and Michigan's football schools.
Right.
How would you describe Michigan's basketball following and how the allegiance, how it splits?
Yeah, when John Beilein came in, this program was dormant. Tommy Amaker couldn't get him to the tournament. He did some good things here, but Beilein really got them to be a perennial NCAA tournament team. What people don't remember, for all Michigan's past success, Fab Five, 89 national championship, I think 8 appearances in the finals. They've only won 1. But, for 11 years, they didn't go to the NCAA tournament. And so Beilein comes in, and now they've gone to 4 Sweet 16s in a row. That's the expectation here. We talked to guard Eli Brooks about it, and he said, man, if we don't get there, we're failing. And there's been a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon, especially with Michigan's difficulties in football over the last 14 years since Lloyd Carr retired. We saw, obviously, the Michigan-Florida State game a few years ago in the bowl game. Was a great game. Michigan's kind of descended since then, and people need something to latch onto, and here you are. Even then you bring Juwan Howard back, and he's even brought this thing, I wouldn't say to another level, because it was pretty elite under Beilein when you're going to Final Fours. But for him to be able to do what he's done has really impressed a lot of people and gotten a lot of people interested. Michigan, I wouldn't say it's a basketball school yet, but Jim Harbaugh better step it up, man, because Juwan Howard's the most popular guy in town right now.
Well, another popular guy is Hunter Dickinson, who the big guy, this freshman center, who's freshman All-American, one of the best players in the country already, is a freshman who strongly considered Florida State. Florida State was one of the final 3 or 4 schools. What has he been like? I mean, obviously you can see the numbers and people have seen him play. He's an impressive player. Has he exceeded expectations?
Without question. I was talking to John Beilein, who's now an analyst for the Big Ten Network, and he told me, he said, this is a once in 20 years freshman as a big man to come in and do what he's done. Now, he's tailed off a little bit. You can see the wear of the season is grinding on him a bit, but there was a time early in the season, probably through 15 games, that he was shooting 72% from the floor, and they couldn't stop him. Now, he's getting added attention. I don't think Florida State will. I think they're bigs, and I was going to ask you about that. I think they're going to probably try to man him up with one guy, and he's had some issues. Kofi Coburn, for example, at Illinois, he had a tough time scoring over him. This is not going to be a walk in the park like it has been against some of the smaller big guys in the Big Ten. So, but he's he's dominant left hand, so the teams are starting to figure out a little bit more how to play him. And like I said, he's worn down a little bit, but a beautiful touch. He gets to the free throw line, shoots over 70%. You're going to see him in a couple of years, I think, be the kind of guy who steps out a little bit more. He's got a great jump shot. We just haven't seen a whole lot of it. We'll see. He's gone to that well a few times. This might be a game where he has to do that with Florida State's length, man. It's going to be tough sledding inside. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they play him and how he responds, because they've been doubling him now for about 2-3 weeks. In one stretch, he had 2 assists to 19 turnovers over a 3 or 4 game stretch. So he's got to be better than that.
And I want to ask you one more thing, and then you can feel free to, we can go back and forth. Obviously the loss of Isaiah Livers was a huge deal. I'm assuming there's no chance of him playing, and how has that changed their team? I know they bounced back from that heartbreaking loss to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, but they've won obviously won their first 2 games in the NCAA tournament. How different do they look without him, and is there any chance he might be able to play?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. It's a broken foot, stress fracture. It sounds like 8 weeks. So
Wow.
everybody says, well, if they get to the Final Four, maybe they'll come back and, pull a Bill Russell or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's not happening, man. He's got to look out for himself, and those things take a while to heal. But what it does is takes one more shooter off the floor. This kid was shooting 50% over a 5-game stretch before he started getting hurt, and you could see there was something off. He just wasn't the same player. When you've got a guy like that and a 7-footer inside where you can find him and spread the floor, that really takes your offense to another level. And I picked them actually to lose to LSU because they didn't have the guys that were stepping up. They kind of struggled down the stretch and sputtered a little bit without him and without that extra shooter on the floor. And then Shawnee Brown comes out of nowhere, Wake Forest transfer, and steps up and scores 21 points. But those shots aren't going to come as easy. Like I've been saying, against LSU, they don't defend. I don't know if you've seen them this year, but that's their defense optional program. That's not Leonard Hamilton. That's not what they're going to face. So they need another one of those guys to step up. And what's going to be interesting to me is how they deal with that length. I think they average 6'8", if I'm not mistaken, in their starting lineup. And so big guards against Michigan's Mike Smith and Eli Brooks. I was going to ask you, do they post up their guards at all? And if not, is that something that we might see against a guy who's like 5'10" and Mike Smith?
They don't do it a ton, but they've shown they've tried to a couple times. They just haven't been real successful at it. In fact, in the last game against Colorado, Scottie Barnes tried to post up the Colorado's guard is about 6 feet tall, and he's got 9-inch advantage. And he went to, but they didn't give him the ball. Florida State, it's one of Leonard Hamilton's kind of constant complaints is that they don't do a great job of feeding the post. He'd like to see more post touches than they get. But it's something that they want to do, but they haven't been real effective at it. So, we might see it, but it just hasn't been a strong suit so far.
It sounds to me like this is a better 3-point shooting team than they've had in the past. Is that right?
Unbelievably better. Yeah. I mean, it's like a different team. It's like a different program. They've never shot the ball this well, really, for years. A lot of teams just kind of would zone them up because they just couldn't shoot the ball well enough, and they would have a really tough time against teams like that. But they've gotten better. They've got a few guys who, I mean, MJ Walker was having a career year before he started. He's starting to have some, I guess, tendonitis or cartilage in his knee that's been bothering him, and his 3-point shooting has dropped off. But he was shooting about 50% for most of this year. Raekwon Gray can shoot it a little bit. They've got several guys that can. Wyatt Wilkes, who that is not a big time player, but he can shoot threes. Anthony Polite, who had the big game against Colorado with 22 points, he's a guy that can really knock down spot up threes. So they've got several guys that can shoot it. Scottie Barnes will shoot it if he's wide open, and he can knock it down if he's wide open. So they've got, this is a much better 3-point shooting team, and it's a continuation of, again, from the team you saw a few years ago where Florida State was still really in that defensive mentality. They were just starting to get this more of a wide open kind of spaced out attack, and this has been the culmination of it. This team is, last year's team was probably better overall, but this year's team is the best offensive team we've seen under Leonard Hamilton. Really, until the last few weeks, they've been tailing off a little bit. We'll see if it seemed like in the second half against Colorado it came back a little bit. So we'll have to see how they do against Michigan. What's
Barnes' game as a 6'9" guard? Because Juwan talked about him and what a special kid he was. He and the Howard boys actually won a state championship down there together. And he said he's like a family member, but he also said that, hey man, I want to beat my grandma one-on-one if I'm playing her, and I'm going to be physical with her. So he said, all friendships are off the table, man. But what's Barnes bring to the table?
Yeah, man, he's a guy that I think, like a lot of one and dones, his best basketball is going to be played probably in the NBA. I mean, he's and somebody asked me the other day if I felt like he's failed to meet expectations because he's not scoring 18, 20 a game or whatever. I don't think so. I think he's met the expectations, maybe exceed them in some ways. He's not a natural point guard, but they've had him playing the point. He's got great vision. He's really got really good vision. He'll make some passes that you're like, man, how did he see that? But then, and he can pass over the defense because he's 6'9". He'll also make some just terrible decisions in even these postseason games and late in the season. He's made some just lackadaisical passes. He's tried to just unnecessary risks. Some things that you can't have that turn into points the other way. And now all of a sudden you have a 5 or 6 point swing in a close game. And that's been something that's really been a hindrance for him. But the most impressive things I think are defensively, he's just so long. And you'll see opposing point guards. It's almost like he takes their breath away because he's got it's like a 7-foot wingspan, and he's so athletic that it's really difficult for them to even just get the ball around him to make passes. And then in the open court, man, he hasn't done as much lately. I think he's been battling a little bit of a leg injury for parts of the season as well. But when he's right and they spread the floor, I mean, he beat Florida. I mean, he some big plays earlier this season in big games where they spread the floor and he got to the basket. He's so long, you can't really defend him because he can keep the ball so far away from the defender. So he's impressive, but it's been fits and spurts. It's not like he's a guy that's been taking over games. It's just, you'll see flashes here or there when you say, okay, now I know why he's going to be a lottery pick.
Right.
He just has to avoid the big mistakes. He's had some pretty bad mistakes as well.
I was going to ask you the commonalities in the losses. Perplexing loss to Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, down the stretch, and you're thinking, how is this team losing to these teams? What's been the deal there?
I think personally, and they don't say this, but I think they maybe struggle a little bit with the pressure of when they knew they could win the ACC if they just won this game early in the season. One thing that I thought kind of hurt them, they lost early in the season to UCF, who's not a good basketball team. They lost early to Clemson, and I felt like sometimes they if they didn't feel challenged, that sometimes they didn't play with the right intensity, and they just kind of felt like they're such a good shooting team. They would out skill their opponents. And that wasn't what I saw late in the season. I think it was more the pressure. I thought they felt like and then you got a couple guys banged up. So MJ Walker, who had been their leading scorer, is not the same guy he was. So now you have other guys trying to feel like they've got to take on a bigger role, maybe forcing some things. Raekwon Gray has been the really the most consistent player throughout the course of the year. He's a 6'7" point forward, really dynamic and versatile player. But he struggled a little bit in the ACC tournament when they had a chance to do some things. So, I think it was a combination of the wear and tear of the season. I think Scottie Barnes, like you said, with Hunter Dickinson, maybe he's wearing down a little bit as a freshman, hitting that wall a little bit. And then I think some guys were kind of pressing, but I think one of the coaches said when they got to Indianapolis and they had a few days off and they just kind of could decompress a little bit, he felt like that he saw some spirit coming back to them. Yeah. And I wasn't so sure during that UNC Greensboro game when it was nip and tuck, but the second half in Colorado was against Colorado. That was the best we've seen them play in a few weeks. We haven't seen that from them for a while.
And Colorado had been playing great ball. Let's be honest, man, coming into that tournament. So 5 seed for a reason. So it's going to be interesting to me how Mike Smith, Michigan's point guard, who's been really good this year, the pressure seemed to get to him a little bit too in the length of LSU's guards. And to me, it was the first time all year I thought, okay, he doesn't have confidence. He's not confident out there. He was making some unbelievable turnovers that he hadn't made all year. He hit one big shot down the stretch, but he was like, okay, some turnovers that just mind-boggling. So to me, that's going to be one of the keys to the game, how Michigan deals with their length. I don't know how good Florida State's three-point defense is. They pretty good at defending the line.
They can be, but they also they've been victimized sometimes with guards that can get into the paint and kick out for three because they help. They're going to help on defense. Sure. So the guys on the wings are going to cheat in. They're going to try to do whatever they can to protect the paint. So and because they haven't been great at containing the dribble, really what a lot of teams did that have had success against them is because FSU switches everything. Yep. A lot of teams, if they've got quick guards, they'll get a switch to where you've got Balsa Koprivica, the big center, or Malik Osborne, or 6'10" or 7 foot guy guarding a point guard. Then they drive and then kick for threes, and they've gotten burned on that some. Where they've gotten a little bit better is Balsa, the big guy, has gotten better about guarding those guards. He's done a better job of keeping them in front of them. So they haven't had to help out quite as much. But they can be, if they get burned by threes, it's usually by kickouts. And that's something that, that's been, kind of a challenge for a while. You asked earlier about defending the post. Traditionally, since Leonard Hamilton's been here, they've been incredible at defending the post. I mean, from guys like Tyler Hansbrough there's been guys through the years that have come in averaging 20, 22, 18 points a game. And Florida State's done a great job of shutting them down they front the post with those big guards. They really obstruct the vision for the guards to make those entry passes. And it just becomes more difficult. And then a lot of times, a lot of those post players don't get fronted a lot. So they're not as comfortable with it and they get frustrated. And so they've had a lot of success, but this team hasn't been quite as dominant in that area that I've seen. Kessler from North Carolina had a big game against them inside, coming off the bench. He did really well. So this is gonna. I'm curious to see how they do in this situation because I think he's the best big man they faced
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah, I tell you what, when he gets going, man, he's a load. So it's like Richard Pitino said at Minnesota, man, he throws it up there and it just falls in no matter what he does. Now, again, hasn't been as consistent, but he's the kind of guy that can go off and get you 21 and it's quiet. You look at the box score and you say, oh my God, how do you finish with 21 points? So, but I see this as a toss up, man. I don't know about you, but this is a 50-50 game to me. With Livers, I'd feel better about Michigan's chances having one more shooter out there. Michigan's guards are not the kind of guys that are going to get to the rim consistently. They move the ball well, but they're going to play inside out. And with Florida State's ability to defend the post, I think that plays to their advantage.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I think it's going to be a good game.
Yeah.
I think the Florida State's been pretty good, I think, in close games for the most part.
Mhm.
Where they've had a tough time sometimes earlier this season is that they got behind. Sometimes they just couldn't claw their way back into it, and it affected their shooting. If they weren't defending well, it would translate to the offensive side. With Michigan, have they been in? I mean, obviously the record's incredible.
Yeah.
Have they been out in front most games? Have they had to come from behind at all? And how have they been in close games?
Yeah, a few times at Wisconsin when they came back from a shutdown, like a 3-week shutdown, they had to come back from about 10 points down at halftime. They were able to do that. They came back from against Ohio State and made a game of it when they were down 13 with about 5 minutes to go in the Big Ten tournament. Unbelievable comeback. So they're pretty poised like that. Even LSU was in danger of kind of pulling away with some of the shots that they were hitting, man. And that would demoralize a lot of teams, when you've got Cam Thomas out there chucking a 24-footer, with a guy and a hand in his face and the guy's knocking him down with regularity. So, but they've got a veteran team. They've got a lot of guys who have been there before, as you know, under John Beilein, and guys that have played in Final Fours. So I think they feel pretty good about that aspect of it. So if they fall behind, I think you're going to see them continue to claw. But the one thing that is, I keep coming back to is that length, man. They haven't seen that. Juwan Howard did say today, he said, well, we've seen all kinds of teams. We've seen length. You haven't seen length like this, especially at the guard positions. So going to be fascinating to me to see that chess match play out.
Well, awesome, Chris. Well, appreciate it. And if you guys subscribe to warchant.com, you can go on to the Wolverine.com and read all those articles. You can't go post on their message boards.
That's right.
Can't be trolling anybody, but you can read the articles. They've got tremendous coverage of Michigan. You can read everything about what's going on in their program going into that game. And same thing, Michigan fans, you can read all of our stuff at warchant.com. And we'll lead up to the game. We're sending Corey Clark up there to Indianapolis, and he'll be covering it. You guys obviously will be covering it as well.
Yep.
And look forward to it, man. I really should be fun. It's as you said, neither football program is doing a ton right now, so it's great to have this basketball March Madness.
Yeah, a little distraction, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Chris. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Take care.